The House That Waited, a cozy and mysterious story. When Leah moved to a small seaside town, she was searching for peace. After years of living in a noisy metropolis, she longed for something simple, a small house with a view of the sea, quiet days filled with books, long walks, and cups of hot tea. One house immediately caught her attention. It was old but cozy, with large windows that always seemed to glow with soft light. It felt as if this house had been waiting for someone. From the very first days, Leah noticed something peculiar. Every morning, she would find a fresh flower on the kitchen table, a tiny lavender bud, a white jasmine blossom, or a sprig of mint. But she lived alone. The doors were always locked. Her neighbors told her that this house always found its own person. And when it accepted a new resident, it took care of them, in small, almost imperceptible ways, but just enough to make them feel they were not alone. Leah stopped searching for explanations. She simply left her cup of tea by the window, watched the sun set over the sea, and knew, this house had been waiting for her. Leah quickly settled into life in the house. The morning flowers on the table became a comforting routine, as if an unseen presence was looking after her. She would sip her tea by the window, read in the rocking chair, and listen to the gentle breeze rustling the curtains. But one morning, something changed. There was no flower on the table. Instead, a small note lay on a piece of yellowed paper: "You are not here by chance." Leah froze. Until now, she had simply embraced the house's peculiarities as part of its charm. But this was different. Someone, or something, was trying to tell her something. The entire day passed in restless anticipation. By evening, Leah sensed something strange, a faint scent of lavender and a whisper so quiet, it felt as though the very walls of the house were trying to speak. She grabbed a flashlight and began searching. In the attic, inside an old dust-covered cabinet, she found a small wooden box. Inside were dried flowers, just like the ones that had appeared on her table, and another note: "When you remember, the door will open." But remember what? A shiver ran down Leah's spine. The house had been guiding her all along. And now, it wanted her to uncover its secret. She could no longer ignore it. The past was calling her back. And the door was waiting to be unlocked. Leah stared at the note for a long time. "When you remember, the door will open." But what door? She searched the house over and over, listening to the soft rustling in the walls, the whisper of the wind outside. Every now and then, she thought she heard a quiet sigh, like someone was breathing just beside her. The next day, she made a decision: she would check every single room. Nothing. There were no hidden passages, no strange doors, until her gaze fell upon the old mirror in the hallway. It had been there since the day she moved in, but she had never really thought about it. Now, as she stepped closer, something in the reflection felt wrong. For a split second, she saw herself. But not as she was now. It was her, but from another time. A girl in a vintage dress, holding a sprig of lavender. And then, suddenly, a memory surfaced. She knew this house. Not as a new resident. Not as someone who had simply bought it. But as someone who had lived here before. A warm feeling spread through her chest, as if a long-lost memory had finally come home. The mirror trembled, and in its reflection, a door appeared, slightly ajar. But in reality, that door did not exist. Leah took a deep breath, stepped forward, and reached out to touch the glass. For the first time, the whispering walls spoke clearly. The mirror rippled under her fingertips, like water disturbed by a single drop. At that moment, a wave of dizziness washed over her. The world darkened for a fraction of a second, and when she opened her eyes, she was standing on the other side of the reflection. The house looked the same, yet something was different. The air was filled with the scent of lavender, the walls felt warmer, and golden sunlight streamed through the windows, even though, in reality, night had already fallen. On the table sat a cup of tea. Still warm. As if someone had been waiting for her to return. But the strangest thing of all, the chair by the fireplace was occupied. Leah gasped. A young woman sat there, identical to her in every way, but dressed in clothing from another era. Her hair was neatly styled, a delicate bracelet with a lavender charm adorned her wrist. She lifted her eyes slowly and smiled. "You came." Her voice was soft. Familiar. Leah felt her breath catch. "Where am I?" she whispered. "Where you have always been. You just didn't remember." The girl reached for a small wooden box beside her and opened it. Inside were the same dried flowers Leah had found before. And beneath them, an old photograph. It was her. Leah. But dressed in that same vintage gown. A strange warmth bloomed inside her, as if something deep within her soul had finally clicked into place. "You lived here once. This was your home." Leah looked at the girl before her. And in that moment, she understood. This wasn't just a shadow of the past. This was her. She had always been here. And the house had been waiting for her return. Leah sat across from herself. Or rather, from the person she had once been. A strange warmth filled her chest. She didn't remember this life, but deep down, she knew, it was real. "I lived here?" she asked softly. The girl in the chair nodded. "Yes. And you promised to return." Leah ran her fingers over the old photograph. The house looked almost the same, except for a veranda visible in the window, one that no longer existed. "What happened? Why did I forget?" The girl lowered her gaze. "The house waited for you, but time does not stand still. Sometimes, to protect itself, the mind hides the most important memories. But now you're here again. That means you're ready to remember everything." A gentle breeze whispered through the house, the curtains swayed, and the scent of lavender filled the air once more. "And what happens now?" Leah asked, watching her reflected self, waiting for an answer. The girl only smiled. "Now, you decide." In that moment, everything around her spun. The room dissolved, the mirror trembled. And Leah woke up. She was standing in her own living room, in front of the old mirror. In her hands, she held the very same photograph. But now, in the corner, written in small, delicate handwriting, were the words, "You can always come home." Leah's breath caught. She no longer felt like a guest. This house had truly been waiting for her. And now, at last, it was home. She traced the inscription with her fingers. "You can always come home." Such simple words, yet they echoed in her mind, filling her heart with a strange, comforting longing. She looked around again. The house was the same, but something had changed. Or maybe, something long forgotten had simply returned. Leah inhaled deeply. The scent of lavender still lingered, as if someone had just passed through the room, leaving behind the faintest trace of their presence. "But I'm alone, aren't I?" She slowly walked down the hallway. The floorboards creaked softly beneath her feet, not eerily, but rather, fondly. As if the house was welcoming her back. As she passed the walls, she noticed small details she had overlooked before, tiny scratches on the doorframes, faint marks where paintings had once hung, worn patches on the wallpaper where someone had often leaned. It was all hers, pieces of her past, her life, her story. She stopped at the base of the attic stairs. And then she felt it, something heavy shifting in her pocket. A key. Leah pulled it out and turned it in her palm. The engraving on its surface read, "Lavender." Her fingers instinctively curled around the railing. "I have to go up." Step by step, she climbed the staircase. Each footstep echoed softly in the quiet house. At the top, there was only one door. Once, as a child, she had come here often, hiding away from the world. But then, something had happened. She hesitated before the door, the key trembling in her grasp. A gentle breeze whispered behind her, urging her forward. She slid the key into the lock. Click. The door creaked open. Inside, the attic was nearly empty. A dusty, sunlit room. Golden light filtered through a small window. And on the table, a book. Leah stepped closer, hesitating only for a moment before carefully opening it. On the very first page, written in elegant script, was her name. And beyond that, a story. Her story. Everything was there, her childhood dreams, her joys and fears, her hopes. And at the very end of the page, the same familiar words, "You can always come home." Leah smiled. She remembered everything now. And she finally understood. The house had never left her. She had just needed to find her way back.